Hello, and welcome to, thank you for joining us for the final live chat of our 2020 series about the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships. My name is Ryan Galish, and I'm one of the program managers here with the AAAS S&T Policy Fellowships. I'll be your moderator for today's chat, and this chat series is an opportunity to hear from fellows and ask them your questions. The 2020 series features one chat each month of the application season, and today's topic is Ask a Fellow Anything. All chats, including this one, are recorded and made available on our website for on-demand viewing, and you're free to watch or rewatch any of our earlier chats. This is our final chat with fellows before the application closes at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, November 1st. And we hope to answer as many of your questions as possible during our time together today. You can submit questions via chat at any time by clicking the questions box below, as shown on this slide now, and typing your questions there. In your message, you can indicate which person or people the question is directed to. We may answer your question in the chat box or ask the question to the panel itself. And today, I'm happy to be joined by three fellows, Alias Smith, Erin Soule, and Balkcum, and they're here to share their experiences on what it's like to be a fellow. I'll share some quick introductory information on each of them first. Alias Smith was a recent executive branch fellow at the National Science Foundation in the Division of Molecular and Cellular Biosciences. During his fellowship, Elias focused on outreach initiatives to HBCU institutions and synthetic biology interagency collaborations at the NSF. Elias currently serves as an associate program director in the Office of Emerging Frontiers and multidisciplinary activities at the NSF. He holds a BS in biochemistry and a PhD in microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics. Erin Soule is serving as a second-year fellow placed at the Department of Defense in the Laboratories and Personnel Office. Erin is part of several teams representing different portfolio areas in the office, including the STEM team, the infrastructure team, tech transfer, and an interagency working group preparing a best practices in STEM mentoring document. Upon completion of the fellowship in late 2021, she'd like to stay in the federal government space and work on policy development and implementation as it relates to human health, but she remains open to other possibilities. She earned a BA in molecular biology and a PhD in pharmacology and cancer biology. Lastly, Adam Balkcum joins us today after just completing a 2-year executive branch fellowship in the Department of Defense in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, and also another fellowship at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. While at the DoD, he developed department guidance on the cybersecurity of semiconductor devices and helped manage their $3.2 billion program. At the White House, he led the development of science and technology policy related to space and critical infrastructure resilience, culminating in the production of 4 national policy documents. Adam is an electrical engineer who has specialized in high-power microwave amplifiers. He has worked in industry, academia, and at 2 national laboratories conducting basic research and developing new microwave products for many varied applications. I want to thank each of them for joining us today for this conversation. As I mentioned earlier, the theme for today's chat is Ask a Fellow Anything. So as the audience is submitting their questions to us, I'm going to go ahead and use my moderator privilege to ask the first question. And that first question to the group will be, so knowing what you know now, what do you wish someone had told you before you applied to the STPF?
I guess I can go first since nobody else is speaking up. So I've said this a number of times. It's probably the first time for the people who are viewing to hear this, but I think the most important thing for me would have been to realize that the fellowship could last 2 years. It's very likely that you could have a second year. That wasn't real clear to me when I applied, and so I was setting up my personal life basically for a one-year fellowship. And then I found out later on that like 2/3 of the people end up doing a second year. And unfortunately for me, that had some pretty tremendous financial implications, which I'm living through right now. So I think that was the most important thing. So if you get into this, just have that in the back of your mind that it could very well likely be 2 years, and in that case, it may be better for you to relinquish wherever you're coming from, an apartment, house, whatever, relinquish that, and then just move to the Washington, D.C. area. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Erin or Elias?
I'll go next. I think I would have liked greater emphasis on the idea that you may not be placed in an office that sounds like it's directly using your skill set or your area of expertise. So I know when I applied and I was looking at places to interview or offices to interview, my mind wasn't as open as I think it should have been to opportunities that were presented to me. So I would just give that bit of advice to say that you have soft skills, you have technical skills that can be used in almost any of the offices. So keep your mind open when faced with opportunities.
Thank you. Erin?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I would actually echo something really similar to Elias of, you can come in without any policy experience. I didn't have any policy experience before starting the fellowship, so I was super nervous. Like, am I going to be able to be effective? But so much of the skills and training that we receive in our graduate training is so applicable to what we do on a daily basis that you really do have the skills to be successful in this fellowship. So that would have been good to know ahead of time. So I would have been maybe a little bit less nervous on my first day.
Great. Well, thank you for those responses and helping us kick off the conversation. We're going to switch to some questions from the audience now. And the first one we'll go with is, did anyone apply to 2 different program areas? Doesn't look like Adam did. Elias?
I did not.
So I have to think back now to my application. I applied to, I know one was definitely in energy and agriculture, and the other one was more in the, I guess, I don't remember the category that we had back then, but the basic science, but there was two categories that I applied to.
Yeah, and there was a shift a couple years ago where in the executive branch, people used to be more kind of the track based, where there might be diplomacy, defense, and then there's one more health. Now it's everyone that applies to the executive branch just kind of can apply to all. I think what maybe this person is asking about is 2 different program areas, meaning executive branch, judicial, and legislative, and obviously, these folks on this call unfortunately did not apply for two program areas, but that's definitely something applicants can do and do a lot of. The one thing I would note is you do want to make sure you tailor your application and also your references, their letters for the different branches. You don't want them to just use the same thing because they're not the same. The fellowships are not the same experience, and you'll by going to the Capitol Hill versus going to a federal agency, you'll gain different skills. You'll have different experiences, so you want that reflected in your application materials. We'll move on to another question though. How would you suggest helping your references to tailor their letters? How would you suggest helping your references to tailor their letters to different program area applications? Kind of a lot of reference that, so we might just move on. So this is relevant. What would be any of the panelists' advice for preparing to help prepare their references to submit their documents?
I guess I'll take that one. I think it's safe to say this now that I'm out of the program, but I actually wrote first drafts for several of my references. They actually asked me to do that, so I put together some information, and they took it and they personalized it, made it, they basically used it to rewrite it in their own words. But and I think that's probably pretty common, especially in academia, that request is made. So I don't think that you should feel necessarily funny about doing that. But at the same time, don't hold back on your the descriptions of yourself and trying to be modest, because I think that probably will not benefit you if you try to be overly modest. So unless they come back to you and say that they absolutely want nothing, then I think it's appropriate to provide them with some information and background information on what your accomplishments are, what your interests are, because it's likely that whoever you get to write these letters of recommendations are not going to be completely familiar with absolutely everything that you've done in your career. So I think it's appropriate to give some information.
When I asked my references to write for me, I asked them first, and they all said yes. I was very lucky. I did not have to provide first drafts, but I have had to do that before. Definitely not a great or fun activity. But when I sent them like the official documentation, I sent like the link to the AAAS website so they could understand what is this fellowship. I also sent, I believe on one of the pages, it shows how the scoring is broken down. And I sent that along, and I sent along the CV I was going to be uploading. And I believe I sent my personal statement as well. It wasn't asked for, but I was trying to think of, okay, what could anyone potentially want to know about this, and included that for them to reference.
And then just to add to all of that, because I did a combination of both of those for my references, keep your references updated on when everything is due, and give them reminders, ahead of time, because everybody gets busy, and it's, don't take it personally if that slipped off their radar, but definitely giving them timely reminders will help them, make the time to write a good letter for you.
Thank you for those responses. And I will note that you can, as an applicant, see whether or not your reference has actually submitted their letter to us. So in addition to any reminders you send them, you get the confirmation from us that they have in fact submitted the necessary documents. All right, the next question is, what career stage were you at when you applied for the program? And then also off of that, how do you feel about your fellowship experience? How do you feel about your fellowship experience contributed to your career at that stage? So maybe just any reflections on, if you're early, mid, late, and how that impacted, how you went through the fellowship, or maybe even what you gained from the fellowship.
So I guess I start with that one. When I applied to the fellowship, I guess be considered early, mid career. I was about 5 or 6 years teaching at Northern Virginia Community College. And my idea with the fellowship was I was going to go for 1 year. And so I had asked my college for 1 year leave of absence, and then loved what I was doing in my office, and had to then go back to my college and resign from my position to, try my hand at federal life and that career path. So what I learned was that a lot of things that I was able to do at the community college, I was able to do on a larger stage. And I found that very satisfying, being able to have that impact. But yeah, it was a bit daunting at that time to make that decision to leave a very stable teaching position to step into federal space.
So I would have, I guess, been considered early, but not as early as you could be. So I was, when I finished my position, I had done a traditional postdoc for 2.5 years, with the twist of I did my postdoc internationally. So I was living in Ireland at the time that I applied for the fellowship, because it's really hard to get a job. I thought I wanted to work in industry, like doing industry research, but I got my PhD at Duke, and so there's a huge concentration of PhDs in the Triangle area. So getting a job in industry without industry experience, or at least 2 years postdoc experience, is damn near impossible. So I did a traditional postdoc, and I was like, you know what, academia is definitely not for me. And as I was re-exploring career options, I came across the fellowship and was like, whoa, I think this is what I want to do. So as I mentioned before, I didn't come in with any policy experience. So this has been like a real test. Is this what you want to do when you grow up? And I think the answer is yes, which I'm delighted about. So I think this has been, for me, it's been like a pivot from what I thought I would maybe be doing before to this newer area.
And Adam, would you want to offer any thoughts?
Sure. If I'm very generous with myself, I would consider myself very, very, very late mid-career. So I had worked at a couple of national labs and universities while going to college and graduate school, and then more than 20 years in industry. And I had worked on a number of very interesting things, just very heavy engineering, detailed engineering work. Really enjoyed it, but was interested in policy work, and I worked a lot with several of the federal agencies and some international governments as well. So I had some exposure to government work and how things are done in the government. Plus, I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., so had grew up and went to University of Maryland, so I'd been in this area for 23 years before heading to graduate school in Los Angeles. So it was also a way of basically coming back home because I still have family in the area. So that was kind of a nice extra. But the real draw was I'd gotten to a point in my career where I wanted to try something different. This is definitely something different, and I wanted to work on, big projects of, national or international importance. And so I decided to apply to the fellowship. And then when I was interviewing for possible positions in the executive branch, I got offered a few, and I decided that I would do the one that sort of scared me the most or had the most impact. And that was at Department of Defense, working on a $3.2 billion program to improve microelectronics innovation in the United States, and also the cybersecurity of microelectronic devices. So, where else can you work on a $3 billion program, right? So that was very enjoyable and felt like it was worthwhile. And I was actually going to leave after the first year, but decided I would throw my hat in the ring and go through the second round of interviews, and got offered the position at the White House. And it was, how can I turn that down? So that was quite an experience as well. So felt like I was able to have an even bigger impact on several different programs. So I think overall it's been very, very rewarding. As far as the impact on my career, well, right now I'm sitting in my basement talking to you guys. I don't have a job at the moment, so I'm still sort of working through that. So it's kind of remains to be seen how it turns out for me. Thanks.
Okay, and we got a kind of quick question about references. They asked, where did your references come from? Did you pick references from your PhD program, work managers, or personal references? Elias, if you want to go first.
So I definitely have pulled from my postdoc advisor and my PhD advisor, but then I went to, because they could speak to my technical background, but then I went to my dean since I was working at the community college. And so my dean was my immediate supervisor and she's evaluated me on everything from teaching to, I was a program head. And so to my leadership skills, to my abilities and working across industry as well as the community and the students and faculty. So she was able to speak to those soft skills. And so those are my three. So postdoc, PhD, and my dean.
Erin or Adam?
I did nearly the same thing. I did postdoc and PhD advisors, and then while I was applying for the postdoc that I ended up doing, I got a brief internship at a biotech company, but the biotech company outsources all of their pipetting, so it was like a very office team-based setting, which in a lot of ways would be similar to the fellowship. And so my mentor there was able to speak to kind of a lot of the same skills that Elias talked about, soft skills on working with different teams, picking up items quickly, make sure you're actioning what you're supposed to do, and to try and provide a slightly different perspective than just a technical background.
I guess I'll just amplify that if you have references that can speak to the soft skills as well as the technical skills, because the soft skills are very important, especially if you're going to be working across agencies. A lot of different personalities out there, a lot of different way people communicate and work. So if you have your references can supply some examples of how you utilize your soft skills to tackle, situations that are likely to come up while working in the federal government. I think that would be to your benefit. For my references, I think we had to have 3 references when I first applied, and so I got one from industry, one from academia, and one from the federal government. So I thought that was a kind of a nice way of approaching it, because I kind of maybe snowed the AAAS committee a little bit, because again, I was in industry for 20 plus years. So that's, a majority of my experience, but I also was at universities and national labs and did a lot of work with government. So I kind of wanted to emphasize that diversity in experience, and it seemed to have worked. So that might be something to your advantage, or something that you should consider trying to show that you have, honestly, if you have the experiences to kind of bring up everything that you can to show that kind of diversity.
And I would just add and emphasize that you're having your references speak to your soft skills is really important. When the selection committees are reviewing applications, for the most part, they know you're smart. They know you earned your PhD. They know you know your stuff. It's the soft skills they're really trying to get at, and that your leadership skills, your work in the community. That's really important to show. All right, so next question, I think we sort of talked about a little bit. Erin, I think you touched on this one a little bit, but someone asked, how did you get started involved in policy, and was the fellowship your first policy experience?
Yeah, so I didn't have really traditional science policy experience. I know a lot of graduate or a lot of institutions have that. I did not take advantage of that, but once I did start being interested in this fellowship, I did look for how other activities I was already doing were maybe policy adjacent, just not quite specifically 100% science policy.
I guess I would amplify that. So I didn't have any direct policy experience either, and having interacted with 3 fellowship classes, I think the vast majority of people had no policy experience before applying. So don't think that that's a drawback. But at the same time, so if you have some policy experience, I think you definitely want to emphasize that. And if you don't have any policy experience, you should, by all means, express your level of interest in working in policy. So that would be very important. And as Erin indicated a minute ago, that if you have experiences that are somewhat related, try and emphasize those as well.
Yeah, and then to kind of echo with the related experiences, I would say that most of you, you'll have something in your background that can inform policy. And so keep that in mind. And so I give you a story where I was at a party in DC with one of my friends who's a former fellow. She was the one who clued me into the fellowship program. But they found out that I was teaching at a community college, and a bunch of them were looking at education policy. And they were the ones who finally convinced me. They're like, you need to come and do this policy fellowship and have a voice in guiding these type of policies. And so that was the final sort of idea put into my head that, oh, okay, maybe this could be for me. Because I've been resisting doing the fellowship because, like I said, I had a very nice position at the college, and that's where I thought I would, run out my career. But fellowship definitely changed that plan.
For the better, we hope. And I think just in terms of policy, the program, we look at policy from a broad definition. So it doesn't have to be strict, science policy in the traditional sense. It can be, policy, it's something in your community, something in your school, something at your place of worship, whatever it may be, that can be considered policy background. So did you feel, this is kind of going post-application now, so did you feel prepared to enter your fellowship office, and how did the orientation process help prepare you? That might take a minute to think on that before responding.
Yes, I'll go first then. I didn't feel like I was prepared because I was going into a completely different area. My background's in microwaves. I ended up going into microelectronics and Department of Defense. And I had a couple of courses in microelectronics, but that was back when they were talking about thousands of transistors on chips. And now it's literally trillions of transistors in certain types of devices. So to try and prepare myself, I did some reading. I got in contact with my mentor in the early summer and asked them, what should I be doing? What should I be reading? Can you send me some stuff? And so he did. So I thought that was that was helpful. And I think if you're interested in policy in general, there's a number of books or webinars that you could read or watch to come up, try and come up to speed better. I have to say that my experience in policy has been somewhat different. If I thought about what I thought it was going to be 2 years ago versus what it ended up being, it was somewhat different, and some things were a little bit surprising. But overall, I think it was a good experience.
So I would say that for one part of my fellowship or work in the office, I was prepared for, because I was asked to use some of my subject matter expertise in synthetic biology, molecular biology to support one of the programs. So I was ready to jump, full in for that. The part that I wasn't ready for was, and this is going to differ from office to office, my mentor and co-mentor basically said, here, the office is your oyster. What do you want to do? And so coming in presented with a huge smorgasbord of opportunities, like figuring out what do I want to do, how do I want to be impactful, and how can I make this use this opportunity to kind of stretch myself. And so I chose 2 other projects, one that was kind of within my wheelhouse, so using my education background to make modules to reach out to HBCUs and run workshops. And so that was only a little bit of a stretch, but the other stretch was working with an interagency work group and working with people who are directors or chiefs or things like that. And I was the one tasking their small work groups. And so I was not ready to go into that, but that's something you learn very quickly, is that you'll interact with people of all levels. And everybody recognizes that you have skills to bring to the table, but it can be daunting at first.
Erin, would you like to?
Yeah, I have to agree with a lot of what Adam and Elias said. I mean, I learned a lot at the AAAS orientation. I hadn't done a government class in a very long time. And so I guess it was really interesting to learn that. And then we had a department-specific day of orientation where I think the kind of take-home message was there's going to be so much to learn, and you're not going to feel prepared, and you might even feel a little bit useless, but like that's okay. We're doing this fellowship to learn the policy experience. We're not being brought in as policy experts. We're experts in our field, and you may or may not use that, but you're not expected to come in and be an expert policy analyst. They're there to train you and teach you. So I guess I knew that I didn't know, and I had to get comfortable with that, and I've learned a lot.
Thank you for those responses. Yeah, and so for those that may not know, each year at the start of the program year, there's a 2-week pretty intensive orientation that we put on for all the fellows. So you hear from a variety of speakers from the executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, people from academia, people from industry. It's kind of a ground-setting event for the fellowship. All right, so our next question is, what's your advice for someone in grad school or a postdoc to make themselves a better applicant?
I guess if your university has some organization that deals with science policy, get involved with that, or find an organization. There's citizen science, for example, that's kind of in many different communities around the country. So that could add to your policy experience that you can highlight in your application. So I think that would be worthwhile. Again, if you're interested in policy in general, read the books, watch the videos, whatever. Get that greater exposure. You might even talk to the faculty there at the university. They may have knowledge of programs, local programs that you could participate in, or get you in contact with the right person who could help you with that. So one thing about the fellowship that they try and emphasize is the networking aspect, which I was actually very bad at. So I think starting to grow your network even before you get to DC would be worthwhile, because DC's tentacles are very long. They just expand across the country, and so you'll find that people in Colorado or wherever you are have some kind of connection to people in DC, and they can make introductions for you, or tell you what organizations to look at, to get involved with, or to go to their talks, whatever. So I think just starting to do that networking ahead of time can open unexpected doors for you, and you just work your way down the chain until you get where you want to be. So I think that the networking and then getting involved in whatever policy programs might be in your area would be two important things to do.
So I'll echo that, and if there's no apparent specific policy program or organization around you that you have access to, just anything that you can discover more about yourself would be good. And if you can take leadership roles and learn like how it is, because it's a different type of communication, it's a different type of interaction and networking with people when you start taking on leadership roles. Not saying you have to be the vice president or president of an organization, but just somebody who has some responsibility. You learn a lot about yourself. And that shows in how you write your application, that shows in how you interview. And so just being part of organizations helps as well.
I think Adam and Elias pretty much covered it. One of the places, if you're a postdoc, that may be easy to get involved is your Postdoc Society. It may be large or small, but they tend to be around and provide a lot of potential for being a leader within that community at a university, and then also liaising with the school on behalf of that community, and that would be a really powerful experience to have.
Thank you all for those responses. This next question is specific for Adam, and it is, do you have any specific advice for mid/late career professionals applying for the program and how to go about getting started once in the fellowship?
So I think maybe the mid to late career people probably have a little bit of an advantage because there aren't many that apply to the program, and this is kind of my impression. I don't have any inside information or knowledge about that specifically, but I know some people who were younger who had to apply a number of times before they were accepted. And then all of the old farts that I talked to, they were accepted the first time they applied. So there probably is an unfair advantage just because you have more years of experience out there. You've had more opportunities to accomplish things. So I think definitely take full advantage of that, highlight everything that you've worked on. If you can do it in such a way that you can tell a story to your career, I think that would be helpful, and emphasize where you've overcome challenges, both professional and personal, I think, although I emphasize the professional ones, and to show some of those soft skills, the leadership skills, the ability to communicate. I think those are things that are fundamental and that the reviewers would be looking at and judging. So if you have some good wins in your career, you turned around a failing program and turned it into a successful program, definitely tell that story. And if you have one of your references who can back that up, that would be good. Unfortunately, I had that experience, so I was able to use that and actually get the person that my company had failed, turn the program around. They were very happy. The person that we were doing that for actually wrote a reference for me and basically bolstered that story of turning things around, and how it was done and how it was handled. So I think that could be very, very powerful to have as part of your application material.
Thank you, Adam. So we've received a couple questions all on a similar topic area of interview week and finding placements. So before I ask the question and pose to the panelists, I just want to kind of set the stage quickly. So when you apply, in the process, if you move forward, there's a semi-finalist round where you do interviews online, and then if you move forward in the process, you're considered a finalist. In each year, there's what we call finalist interview week, where applicants or finalists meet with offices across the executive branch to learn more about the position. The offices learn about you, obviously, and then afterwards there's a ranking process that then determines where people actually go, and then finalists are sent offers based on those rankings, and then you can either accept or decline. So just as that as kind of the groundwork, basic understanding of how it works, the question for the panel is, can you talk about how you strategized, how you went about your interview week, and how'd you find the right position for you, and how'd you make your final choice on where to serve your fellowship? Anyone want to think
I can
halfway
start
back
on
into
this
that?
one. So ours were all different in that we were in DC for it. So it will be different because I believe AAAS has decided to do virtual interviews, which is what we did last year. And I helped interview the new fellows for my office. So I've been on, I guess, both sides now. But I guess with strategizing, like Elias said, definitely stretch yourself on some things. Pick some places and maybe request an interview, because you can request interviews. Pick some places that feel outside the comfort zone. I guess all you have to lose at that point is 30 minutes to an hour. And, maybe it's like, whoa, that's definitely not for me. But you could also find a whole new area that you're like, wow, I hadn't considered this. So that's a good strategy. I will say, it is a little bit nerve-wracking. I guess it was nerve-wracking because we were in person and we could see everybody's pre-scheduled interview sheets. I had 5 pre-scheduled interviews, and then I felt super self-conscious because there were some people who had like 15 to 20. And I was like, oh no, but really it takes one interview. You have one good interview where they like you like them, you can be a fellow. So really it only takes one, but just kind of go with your gut. In some ways it reminded me of grad school interviews where you just kind of maybe knew a little bit when you were at one school versus another, like, this feels like the place for me.
So I'd like to echo something that Erin said. I think I had 3 pre-scheduled interviews. And when I would look down the line at everybody else's schedule and see it full of 10 to 15 interviews, and that was kind of a little shocking to me at first and wasn't really prepared for that. I did manage to look through the available postings and schedule a 4th interview. And I did take that opportunity to stretch. But like Erin said, when you go on these interviews, of course you want to put your best self forward, but also think of it as you're interviewing them as well. And so definitely get a good sense of what's the type of project that they have in mind for you. Is it very defined? Is it flexible? Do they want you, like in the office that I matched with? They wanted me to carve out my own area based on interest with some guidance from them. So are you comfortable doing that, or do you want something more prescribed? So there's a lot of things that you have to look inside yourself to see what your preferences will be. But I would definitely say during that time, stretch and make yourself seem very personable, like tell your own story. So like Ryan said, all of you are post PhD. We all know that you are very smart and you have a lot to offer. Like Erin, this past season, I was on the side of interviewing for the incoming fellow. The most impressive interviews were the ones that they really seemed passionate, they seemed personable. We knew who that person was beyond what their CV and their statement said. Like we had a sense of how they would fit in the office.
So my first year, since Erin and Elias mentioned this, I had 17 interviews, pre-scheduled interviews, and that was when they were in person. And so they were, Maryland, DC, Virginia, they were kind of all over the place. And so you can imagine having to not only do the interview, but get there and then go from there to the next interview was really a challenge. And I think in retrospect, I only canceled one, so I did like 16 interviews. And in retrospect, I think that was a mistake. I should have I should have canceled some of them at least. But I was of the mindset that, you know, trying to stretch, see all the different possibilities that there are out there. So that's why I did almost every interview. The second year, I think I had 5 or 6 pre-scheduled, but they were, in my opinion, much higher quality offices, or, you know, for me, they seemed to be much higher quality. So even though it was less, I you know, felt really good about the process. I think as far as a strategy, I'll make the suggestion that you could think about what you want to try and get out of this whole fellowship experience, because it's supposed to be a learning experience. So what are the things that you would like to learn, or what are the things that you would like to try and do, and actually write this information out and bring it with you to your interview, or at least have it in your mind when you're talking to these people and the mentors in the offices. And, you know, just ask them, would I be able to do X, Y, or Z, and see what they say. And, you know, hopefully that'll help you in your decision-making process of where you want to go. But I think one general piece of advice I'd like to give is, try and stretch. And the thing that scares you the most, that's probably the right place to go. And both times that's how I made my choice, and I think it was the right choice for me.
Thank you. All right, we have about 13 minutes left on the call. So next question is, to what extent do you think the presidential administration / congressional makeup affected your experience as a fellow?
So I can speak from, I guess, the National Science Foundation point of view. As far as the agency goes, it's pretty well insulated from those type of ebbs and flows that come with an administration. We get like an executive sort of priority list for science, and typically that doesn't change, or let me say, it doesn't deviate too much from what the science community is wanting to put out there. And so as far as NSF funding basic science, and so with the change of administrations, nothing much altered in like what type of science was getting funded, or what type of proposals were being submitted to the agency for requests for funding. Because if you imagine that those programs that are submitting proposals are long running programs, they're not very specific programs to a particular administration. So depending on where you go, the agency is a little bit larger than the current administration.
Yeah, so I think what Elias said is pretty much spot on. So at the Department of Defense, at least in the office that I'm in, there's nobody who's politically appointed in my office. So if there is an administration change due to the election in January, nobody directly in my office will be affected by perhaps not being appointed anymore. That being said, there are people in our leadership chain who are politically appointed, and so we are kind of preparing for, there may be people who are exiting if there's an administration change, and we're just trying to time out getting things signed off through them. Like, you plan as best as you can, and you make it work. But I guess I would say, and this is something that always comes up, that and of course every office could be different, like Department of Defense is like a hyper in the news type of federal agency, but the people I work with, for the most part, they're super dedicated public servants, and they love what they do, and they're there to do their job. And so at some point, It may or may not affect what happens in your office. There are always changing priorities, even if there aren't necessarily changes in administration. So that would feel like pretty par for the course.
Yeah, I think for most of the fellows that in their offices, there's a layer of insulation. They're down a level or two, and there are programs that are in the works that go on for many years, and so there's kind of a momentum to them. And even if the administration changes and they want to change emphasis on programs, it's going to take some time. So I think probably the first year you would not see much change, would be my guess. But there are some offices, like obviously I was at the White House, so that has some connection to the administration. So it was surprisingly not real political. There was sort of the administration's goals that they wanted to achieve, and there was a couple of executive orders that I worked on the implementation side of, and so there was kind of that color to what we were doing, that we were trying to satisfy the goals of the administration. So that's one aspect. There's only one or two fellows at the White House. Most of the fellows are elsewhere. Some of the fellows, though, were actually ended up working with some of the secretaries. Like I know one fellow worked with the Secretary of Energy in her placement. So it's possible that you could have this stronger coupling to the administration. Whether this one continues or if it's a different one. So that's depending on how angry politics makes you, you might want to take that into consideration when you're trying to decide which office you're going to be in. But if you're in an office that's like at the undersecretary level or the secretary level, I think you have to expect that there's going to be this closer coupling to administration activities and goals. But it's, again, fair to say that the vast majority of the fellows are going to be too low really to have that kind of coupling. I mean, their offices are going to be, one or two levels down, so that coupling is going to be diminished.
Thank you. I think we have time for two more questions, but I'm going to ask our panel to try to be brief in the responses so we make enough time for both. First one is, what positive impact has your work as a fellow had, and was it as impactful as you expected before entering the program?
Okay, I'll jump in the interest of time. I'm a big AAAS fellowship fan. I couldn't have asked for a better experience. Again, I got to work on a $3 billion program at the Department of Defense, got to work at the White House on space weather, research and development infrastructure, critical infrastructure resilience, produced a number of reports, got to work across the agencies. So, feel like I really had an impact and was very glad I did it.
So I'd say my most impactful project was working with the HBCU institutions, designing a program that was looking to increase the number of proposal submissions to NSF as well as their competitive nature. So designed a program that's been institutionalized in the Biological Sciences Directorate and is now being rolled out to impact all minority serving institutions.
I think that probably my most impactful project is one of the interagency working groups I'm on. I am the task lead for one of the deliverables, big government word there, deliverable that we'll be putting out, and it's about best practices in STEM mentoring, and it's hopefully going to be used across the federal government by anyone who has people doing STEM mentoring. So I'd say I'm pretty excited about that being fairly impactful.
Thank you all. Yeah, the impact is one of the big things we really try to drill into thousands of the beginning of the year that it's, you're supposed to grow, but it also has to have an impact on society and the communities that we live in. So for the last question, I know since we are approaching the end of our time together, I want to wrap up by just asking each of our panelists to share some parting advice. And the question I'm going to ask is, what is the last thing someone should do before hitting submit on their application?
So last thing, have somebody else read it. Because you are way too close to your own words, but have somebody else read it.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, have other people read it before you're at, just a few days before submission. But yeah, for that final proofread, 100% agree with Elias. You're way too close to it to see if there's a typo left, and you definitely don't want to be leaving that in there.
Yeah, I'll agree with that as well. And I guess just general advice that, again, this is a learning opportunity, but it's also you're expected to contribute something to the nation, to the government. So don't show up with an axe to grind. If you're too angry at this administration, don't come here thinking that you're going to do something to change it, because you're not. So just keep that in mind. You're coming to work, you're coming to contribute. So give it your all, honest effort towards whatever your office is trying to do.
Great. Well, thank you for those final parting advice to our audience, and we hope it serves them well as they continue to do their applications. So unfortunately, this brings us to the end of our time together today. I want to thank Elias, Erin, and Adam for their time today, and to everyone who joined us, thank you for your very insightful questions. As a reminder, the application is open through 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, November 1st. You should feel free to visit the fellowship website for additional fellowship details, to view recordings of these chat sessions, and to begin your application. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question today, or if there's an additional question, please email us at fellowships@AAAS.org. And thank you again for joining us. Join me in giving a virtual round of applause for our panelists and thanking them. So thank you. Thanks again, everybody. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.